Welcome to Chess to Impress. These are lessons for beginners who have just started playing chess and know the basic laws of the game. As we progress in this series, we will discover and talk about various themes that will help you build a strong base. By the way, do you see that quote over there? Every chess master was once a beginner. Who said that? Chernev, right? Every chess master was once a beginner. So today's lesson is on super attack. Yes, you heard it correct, super attack. This is a new term which I just discovered a couple of days ago and I love it. So what is a super attack? A super attack is when you use two pieces to attack one square so that you can overpower its defense. This is a great idea to do near your opponent's king. How can white move and create a super attack on the c6 pawn? If you see right now, white only has a queen which attacks it, and you cannot take it just yet because the black queen defends it, right? So it is relatively easy since it's the first position. What we need to do is we need to hit a particular square 2 or more times. Whenever you attack a particular square 2 or more times, that is called a super attack. So there are two moves. Try to guess it. Of course, we need to use our rook. Think on where should we use our rook. If we need to attack c6, yes, of course, we can move our rook to c2 and create a super attack. That puts more pressure, also overpowers that pawn. Overpowering is when you have more attackers than defenders, right? You have two attackers, there's only one defender. Or if you do not want to play c6, even better, I like this move. Rook to g6, right? So you basically super attack, you put more pressure. Awesome. Let's go to position number 2. Right, now we need to create a super attack, right? In order to create a super attack, we need to hit that pawn or attack that pawn 2 times. So let's start with the bishop. Where should we move our bishop? Okay, some of you might think bishop f8, which also does attack the pawn technically. If you move your bishop to f8, it also technically attacks the pawn, but we should always make sure whenever we launch a super attack or whenever we begin a super attack, our pieces should be on safe squares or on protected squares, guarded squares when they cannot be captured. So bishop d4 is correct because it's just the launch of a super attack, it's just the beginning, it's just the start, but it is not a super attack yet. Why? Because a super attack states we need 2 or more pieces. Right now, it's just one piece. It's just one piece which super attacks the pawn. Right, you heard me correct. So let's imagine the king were to go to h8. Now we need to super attack this pawn, which means we need to use our queen. There are 4 squares where the queen can go, where the queen can move, and start a super attack or conclude our super attack. So the queen can go to g2. Of course, the queen can go to g2. It's super attacking the pawn along with the help of the bishop. The queen can go to the queen can also go to g4 because it looks at the pawn along with the bishop, of course. The queen can also go to e7 because it looks at the pawn along with the bishop. And the fourth and the most important move, the queen goes to e5. Now it kind of superimposes the bishop and it kind of comes in front of the bishop, but again it is a super attack because the bishop and the queen move in the same direction. So the bishop complements the queen and both of them together are looking at the g7 pawn, which means there are 2 pieces, which is exactly what we know. Alright, perfect. Position number 3. Okay, this is just basic. Again, it's for your own visualization to improve your chess eyesight, I must say. So let's go and hit this knight. But the clause is, you should start with the pawn. I will just make random moves with black, okay? It's moves which are illogical, but we just need to kind of like hit the knight just for our own visualization. You need to start with the pawn, then you need to use your bishop. After the bishop comes the rook, then the queen, and then in the end your knight. So you need to follow, or you need to create a super attack in this order. First the pawn, then the bishop, then the rook, then the queen, and then the knight. So let's start with the pawn. Where do I move my pawn? I move my pawn to f5, right? Let's just make a random move. We need to just keep on hitting this, okay? Again, I know it's illogical, but it's okay. Now, which piece comes next? It's the bishop. Where do we move? Only one square. Bishop b3, right? Keep hitting it. One good thing about super attack is you just keep applying more pressure. You need to use your rook. You can go either on c6 or on e1. I choose e1. And now comes the queen. Where do I move my queen? 2 squares. a2 is also correct because now the bishop superimposes the queen, and both of them together are looking at the knight. a2 is also correct. If not, if I want to play more dynamic, if I want to be like more on the offensive, queen d6, because you not only move your queen to a better square, but you're also going inside your opponent's territory. And last but not least, you need to use your knight. So let's move our knight. Where do we put our knight? We put our knight on c5. So the knight looks at the knight, the bishop looks at the knight. Each and every piece helps to super attack the e6 square. Okay. Again, now we need to, now this is quite a bit confusing, but let's talk about this position a bit. Now we need to start a super attack. So let's start with the bishop, right? Where can the bishop go? We can put our bishop on h3 or on e4 to look at the f5 square. Now which is correct? Is h3 correct or is e4 correct? Right? If you play e4, it's a blunder. It's a serious mistake. Why is it a serious mistake? Because if you put your bishop on e4, you're just going to lose it. It's just a free piece. You're going to end up losing 3 points for nothing. Bishop is worth 3 points, 3 important points. If you play bishop e4, the 3 points are up in the air. So the correct move is to play, if you have to use the bishop, you play h3. The h3 square is completely safe. None of the black pieces are attacking it. Not only that, but you've also successfully started an attack. Now let's imagine, okay, just making some random moves. You play a6, they play a6. Now we need to use this rook. Where do we put this rook? Let's say, no, not on c3. We put our rook on f2, right? Now they play, let's just say they play b5. Yes, of course we can capture it, but we need to keep on hitting it. You can capture it, of course, that's completely fine. I think I would have done the same, but again, like I said, it's just an example, just to visualize, just to understand the concept. So yeah. So now we need to use the other piece which is not taking part. Where do we put it? Do we put it on e5 or is there any other square? No, you cannot put it on e5 because the knight captures it, the king controls the square. That'll be a blunder. So you play rook f1. Now the 2 rooks will hit on f5 and we have successfully completed our super attack. And last but not the least, let's hit the pawn in the following order. Use the bishop first, then the rook, and then the knight. So what do we do? First we play bishop c6 so that it looks at the pawn. Then we can play the rook, which has to go on f4 so that it looks at the pawn. And the knight. The knight is special over here because the knight can go on g5 or it can either go on f6, and both those squares attack the e4 pawn. Alright, so to conclude, why do we super attack? We super attack to put more pressure. We super attack to overpower a particular square so that we can have more attackers than their defenders, and we eventually will be able to capture the piece which resides on that particular square.